So we didn't have a meeting last week because it was Thanksgiving. So I had a whole extra week to do nothing. But somewhere in the meantime, I've got a problem with my neighbor. He's throwing his mulch across what I consider the property line, which is killing it's already killed all the grass right there. And I went out when I was out raking leaves, I pushed the stuff back on his property in a pile. And the next day he just came out and promptly put it right back again. And there's a big rock in the yard and he piled it around that. And I thought, well, he's an idiot, so I should find out where the property line is. It's one of those things. If you stand to the edge of the yard and look down a fence line that goes all the way across two or three properties, I think any sane person would say, "Oh, that's the property line right there." So um, I stood there and looked down and thought, well, yeah, he's definitely throwing stuff across there, but he's probably going by some other. There's like the last 10 or 20 feet of the fence that for some reason they moved it in like 2 feet or so. And I assume there was a tree there originally when they put this in, and rather than cut the tree out, they just moved the fence around it. And that might explain why it looks like that. So anyway, I thought, well, if I go online and look up how do I find out where property lines are and how would I measure this stuff, and that turned out to be an ordeal. So I spent 2 weeks on and off trying to figure all this stuff out. And it turns out I can go to a site. The Minneapolis has a site called Minneapolis Property Information or something like that, and I can bring up a map of the entire area, and I zoom in on it. I can find my block, and I at that point, if I click on the outline that's my property, it brings up this thing on the side that says, "Oh, it's owned by this person. This is the taxes on it," and it just goes on and on with all this information. And then I was trying to click inside of that box because when you do, then it'll pull up a latitude and longitude. So I tried to get right on the corner of it and pull up the latitude and longitude for where the corner is. That would tell me where that is in the world, but it won't let you do that. That whole page is just meant to say click inside the box and bring up the information on the left, even though it will give you a latitude and longitude. It wasn't working. So up at the top, I noticed there's a tab that says open in map viewer. So I clicked on that, and it takes me to something called the Minneapolis ArcGIS map server or something like that. And again, you just zoom into your property, and now I can click anywhere and it will give me a latitude and longitude. And I thought, well, I can use and they won't let you zoom in far enough to get really accurate. And I didn't know if what's coming out, how accurate that's supposed to be in the first place. But then I can take that and paste it into Google Maps, and it shows up approximately where I want to see it. But I was noticing somewhere along the line that the two don't seem to correspond exactly. So I don't know if Google Maps is wrong or if the selection I'm doing is wrong. And then later I found another website that does the same thing, but it seems to work better. And I simply thought I could trust that more. So I can get a latitude and longitude for a point, and then theoretically I can either take my robot out and park it on that spot and verify that's where it is, or build a surveyor pole. Since I just foolishly ordered yet another F9P GPS receiver from Ardusimple, and I've got it's like a camera monopod, so it's just like an extendable pole that would be just like the stuff the surveyors use. So if I screw the antenna on top of that and then duct tape all my stuff on the side of that, I could just walk around with that like the surveyors do and stick it on the ground and then know what that location is. So that's something yet to be done. And then I went out, and also when I was digging through that first site from Minneapolis, I can click on my property, and there's a tab that says something like extra information or something like that. And you scroll down and it says, here's it's not called a plat, which I can't remember what plat stands for. Plat is something, it's a drawing that shows where properties are. There's another one, I think it's called a 1/8 section map or something like that. And I click on that and it'll bring up a nice drawing of the property, and they put dimensions on there. So apparently forever they've just controlled this by a dimension. So I look at this drawing, it says the property line on the right hand side is 40 feet from the center of whatever that street is to that line, and on the south side is 30 feet from that street up to the property line. And apparently I couldn't find anything that was specifically written down, say this is that value in a latitude and longitude, so I couldn't just grab that directly. And it looks like And then also there's another tab you can click on. It says show me surveyed properties. I click on that and it'll highlight properties that have been surveyed. And the one just on the other half of the block, there's an alley down the middle, and there's two or three houses over there that have say they've been surveyed, and one right across the street to my east says it was surveyed. But I look at those are all done in the 1920s. So I can pull it up, and it says, yep, this was done in the one I'm thinking of says it's done in like 1925 or 1926. And then you can click on a thing and it'll bring up a PDF of the stored survey that they did back in 1926. And it was basically a hand drawing, but it said in the corners, it said iron, which means they put pins in the ground. So theoretically, you could dig those up and find those pins. And what was the other thing on that? Hold on a second here. And my furnace just turned on, so I was going to close the door so it's not as loud. So this drawing from 1926, it was hand drawn, but it is online, and it did tell me a little bit of extra information of what's going on. And the place that's across the street to the east, that one was done in that one might be the one that's done in 1923. So 100 years ago, they marked off these properties, and since it had a surveyor record of that, it says yeah they put the marker pins in the corners to make that work. Here, let me stop for a second, make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to. We are recording. Okay, my audio is on. We don't want to go through that problem again. So anyway, I found that kind of information, and I tried just measuring. So I went out and I bought this thing. I was over at Harbor Freight. This is a one of those rolling tape measures, and I had one of these that was a mechanical one, and it measures in feet only. And so it's just like the odometry thing on your car that rolls over, and it would make that work. This particular one is, I don't know if this will show up. Yeah, there you go. So the last measurement I made was 30 feet and 2 inches. And you can select this one, you can select feet or meters. And then there's a button that says hold and one says clear. And I think you can maybe save a couple of readings. And so anyway, I bought this thing thinking that might help out to do my measurements. And I think I've finally decided this thing's not as accurate as it should be. So I went out yesterday, or no, before I get that far, I was going to go out and measure some spots in my front yard and try to dig up where I thought the pin was at the south end of the property. So I'm not bothering my neighbor that's being a problem. So I was going to dig that up. So I kept thinking, why I could either use my GPS or use my tape measure. And I thought the other thing was at the other end of the property, they put up an apartment building, and I saw they put a stake in the ground that said property corner. And then they spray painted it with nice pink paint and put a little pink streamer on it. So I thought, oh, that's great. They've actually measured that and surveyed it or whatever they did. So I was going to go measure that to make sure I have what I need. And basically I just simply, so this is going to show up. So basically here's one street here. Here's the alley coming down here. And then right here, there was a wooden stake stuck in the ground right here. And then here's a zoomed in version. Here's the wooden stake. And then there's two fences. Here's the new fence, and here's the old fence down here. And then, so I went over there yesterday to do that. And as I walked around the corner, it turns out there was a guy there surveying the property, or what, I don't know what he was actually doing, but he had one of those fancy tripod things that has the optical stuff on. I can't remember what you call those, but he had a thing that, he would set that up, and then he'd take his pole around that had like a reflector on it or something, and that would give him information on where he was and what the directions were. So I said something to him about property markers. He says, yeah, there's the one pin right there. And it was right next to that wooden post. It turns out the wooden post is not the marker that I was looking for. It's just like 6 inches to the north of that. There's a plastic cap right at ground level that is the actual marker that was put in some years ago. I was talking to him about when this stuff happened, and he said, yeah, his company did it, and he didn't have an actual date on that. But so I don't know that if that was put in originally when my stuff would have been done or not. And then it turns out I saw another wooden stake at the other corner of the property. And he says, oh yeah, there's a pin there. It's just like a rebar driven down in the ground. There's no cap on it. And then as I was coming around before, I noticed that on the other side, there was a hole in the ground next to the fence. I thought, well, they're either working on the the irrigation they're putting in, or they're digging down to find the property marker. Well, sure enough, he dug down and found the property marker there. So I now have 3 surveyed points on that particular property where the apartment is. And that's the opposite end of the block where I'm at. So anyway, I can take my GPS out and go measure all 3 of those, and then go back to any of my online stuff like the ArcGIS and click on a property corner and says, this is the latitude and longitude. So I can see if the number I get from some random website will match the physical location out in the world. So that's something that I want to try. So I went back and thought, well, I could do all that. Thought, no, I'm just going to get a tape measure and I'll just measure from the south end where that street is. I'll measure 30 feet in and put a mark, and go to the other street, measuring 40 feet in, and that should be where the thing was. So I marked up, put spray paint all over the yard, and went to get a shovel. It turns out my ground is frozen. It's frozen enough on the top that I couldn't just simply dig down. And so I went in the house and got some bottles of, like, pop bottles full of hot water, pour on the ground. So while I was letting that soak, I was thinking, I could measure it a little harder. So I went up to the apartment building and found the stake that they put in, the one that's on the correct side, and used this tape measure. This is something I bought at a surplus store one time. It's a 100-foot tape measure that's got feet on one side and meters on the other side. So I just simply stuck a screwdriver in the ground and put the tape on it, pulled it out 60 feet, and put a mark. I painted a line on the sidewalk with spray paint, and then did another 60 feet and painted that line. And that's the line I'm actually looking for right there, is that one. Then I measured on down another 60 feet. I thought, well, that's not right. And I realized, oh, my property is 120 feet in that direction. So I measured down and put that line. I thought, well, that line doesn't line up with the one that I measured from the street. So that was a little concerning on that. But anyway, I've got like 5 points along that sidewalk now that are measured off every 60 feet. I've got those marked. And then I was saying, well, the 2 don't line up. I was trying to think, well, why is that? And I thinking, if I take an actual measurement from a surveyed point at the other end of the block, and as long as I'm not off by more than an inch or so each time I do the measurement, that should be really close to where I want to be. And I kept thinking, well, why is that not line up? So I measured from that point out into the street, which should be 30 feet. And it turns out I was like 8 inches short. So my theory is this thing just isn't accurate enough to do the job. So if I just go out to my lines that I marked, so I know that they are 60 feet apart because I measured them with an actual physical tape measure, I can go out and check that and verify that comes out right. So I'm guessing this thing is probably not as accurate as it should be, and all the little bumps and cracks on the sidewalk are probably affected a little bit. So anyway, I put my new lines. I'd started digging in one spot, and it turns out the new spot looks like it's about 2 feet away. So I marked that off, and it was starting to get dark, so I gave up at that point. So anyway, I'm to the point where I think I know where the pin might be. So if I go back out and pour more hot water on the ground and then dig down there and see if I can find that pin, because they're 2 of the ones at the apartment building are like 6 inches below the surface. So you have to dig down and find them. And the one that I knew about that's by the stake, it turns out that's right at ground level. So it's just the matter of, somebody pointing out it's right there and you go, oh, well, I see it right now. So, I don't even have to dig for that one. So the other thing is I called this up and says, I just made this drawing trying to figure out, say, like over here, here's the new one that I found by the fence that he found. And then over here is the original one by the stake. And then he had gone up here and he put a wooden stake. And this is the one that's just a rebar in the ground. So if you dig down 6 inches, there's just a piece of rebar stuck in there. So I've got three spots there I can measure from. And what I did, I came over here and went from this one, measured down 60 feet, put a line, measured down 60 feet, put a line, took it all the way down here where my thing should be. And that's what so just by doing measurements, I'm trying to get that. I also decided that after looking at all this stuff long enough that that's just the way they control this. They say this is a known point. I don't know how they come up. Well, my thought was the drawing I have says it's 40 feet from this street and 30 feet from this street. And that gives you a known reference there. And then they just simply measure off your property. So it doesn't look like there's anything high tech going on. So it's, just like the surveys from 100 years ago that were hand drawn. And I don't know if they had I don't know if they're using tape measures back in those days, or they had some kind of a surveyor thing, had like a telescope thing on it. I don't remember what those are called, but somewhere along the line, they went through this different evolution. And it's all the way up now to the point where they've got this new optical thing that this guy was using. So I was asking him about how accurate is it, and he says, "Oh, he said a couple inches or something like that." And then I told him that I've got RTK GPS. He says, "Well, yeah, that's some that the thing he thought the thing he had was more accurate than the RTK GPS." And so I actually got a lot of information out of this guy. He seemed to be willing to stop what he was doing and explain all this stuff to me and talk to me about it. So, and then just before we were ready to leave, I'd written down, taken the measurements of these two spots at the one end, and I realized he was walking towards the front of the building. I thought, oh, he's going to cover up that hole that I wanted to see what the pin was inside of it. So I ran around and caught him just as he's ready to push dirt in. I said, "Oh, can I look at that first?" And he said, "Oh yeah, here's the pin right. It's got a white cap on top of, probably just stuck on top of a piece of rebar." So I took a couple measurements and he went in and covered it up. And that's kind of how far I got yesterday. I was at the point where I think I know where the pin might be in my front yard, and now I just got to go back out because it was getting dark last night, so I quit. I just need to go back out and take my shovel and dig down, see if I can find it, because there's no guarantee I have marker pins anyway. Because again, you go look at the internet, it says, "Oh, well, your property may or may not have these pins." It says they may or may not have been moved over the years. And if they did a survey, they may or may not have put in pins, and they may or may not have published the survey. So basically, they're saying, yeah, it's just you're on your own here, is basically what they're trying to tell me. And what was the other thing on that? And then somewhere I saw the statement more than once saying, well, surveying is not an exact science. It says you can go out and hire two different surveyors, and they may not agree on your property line, but it's all in good faith. But if you have any problems, just contact an attorney. So basically, they're saying, we know this is crap. We don't care. We'll turn it over to the legal system. So if there's any issues there, but my whole point is, I just want to see, can I find that pin at the end of the property that where I'm in dispute with this guy. So I just want to find that and be able to, before I stand there and call him a childish idiot right to his face, I want to say, no, here's the mark right here. Just thinking I could take spray paint and actually paint across the yard and say, well, this is the property line. And then when he starts pissing and moaning, I can say, wait, here's the marker right here. I measured it, show him all my drawings and all the stuff off the internet. And we'll go from there. I can't figure out why he's putting this mulch in the yard in the first place. He's killing like 50% of his grass just because, I don't know if he's a new homeowner or what the deal is. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at on that. So I'll probably by next week I'll know what's going on, unless the ground's frozen too much to get down to it. But I think I can still, if I'm pretty sure I know where the location of a pin is, I can take the time, and if I have to, I can pour hot water on the ground and dig down and see if I can find the pin. My thought was, if I can find the pin at the other end of my property, then that's a pretty good indication there'll be one where I want one to be. So that was kind of why I was going to do that. So by taking measurements, I should be able to figure that out. So other than that, I guess that's what I've been doing here for the last couple of weeks, is digging into that. And that's I guess that's all I got to say for now. So I'll turn it over to Al.
Trying to get off mute here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Will that be the second Ardusimple GPS you have, or is that your first Ardusimple GPS?
That will be the third one. The first one I got when they had their Kickstarter, I got that one, and it came with a crappy antenna, and then I put the survey grade antenna on it. And everybody in ROS Agriculture kept whining about, well, what if you had two? Can you do heading on that? I got tired of people whining, so I bought a second one at that point, and a second survey grade antenna, and that's what's on the robot right now. And then this one I bought now will be a third one. So if I want to set up my own base station, I can. Or if I want to put it on a pole so I can just manually measure stuff, I can do it that way. Or it turns out the first one I got doesn't work as well as the second one. And the argument I'm going to make is, they said something about people were burning out their board because it didn't have short circuit protection on the antenna. So if you short out the pin just for an instant, it blows out your chip and your board's useless. So they redesigned it. I assume it was all they did. They put a resistor in series with the module and the connector for the antenna. And so anyway, that one doesn't seem to work as well. It does still work. And it certainly works well enough to do my retrieve my heading from it. So I'd have to find out, would that work as a base station, or I could compare that against the new one to see if I get, accurate results either way. So anyway, I got three of those Ardusimple receivers now, and I will have three of the survey grade antennas.
When you were on their website, did you notice they had a more expensive GPS that runs at 100 hertz?
Is that the one that's like $600 one? Is that they've got lots of stuff now, and most of it is expensive, and because the one that I'm thinking of that runs around $600 or $700, it's got a Septentrino chipset on it, and I think it's a triple band receiver, and they claim it's much more accurate than what the Ardusimple stuff is. They're claiming like sub-centimeter or something, and it could be that one would run at a faster rate. I wasn't paying attention because I didn't want to spend that kind of money on anything, so I didn't really care.
I noticed that it's 100 hertz, and then they have some different disclaimers about you're getting location and altitude. Then it would only run at 50 hertz, but you could get location and altitude at 50 hertz, which is pretty crazy. Anyway, on my side, let's see, I'm on a phone if you can't tell it already. Let me see if I can share. Well, I'll just share screen here. Start now. Can you see my Slack screen at the moment?
No, it just says Al Jones on the screen, so it's not showing your Slack screen.
Let's see, we're back to this. Share. Screen start now. Now it's giving me a list of apps to choose. Slack isn't even on there. Well, anyway, I'm not going to piddle around with this. I'm, as they say, in the field, and I posted into Slack the last path that I had planned, which was a series of rings around, I don't know, about a 1/4 acre plot. And then overlaid on top of those rings is a boostropin. How do you say that? You pronounced it probably better than I did.
Bostrafeden
path with Dubin's keyhole U-turns on each end. So as soon as we get off this phone, that's what I'm going to go do, is try to run that path. So it's been more time consuming than I thought, but I've got something to test, and we'll see how it goes. And that's all I got for today.
Do you want me to open the images in Slack and put them on the screen?
Sure, if you don't mind.
Let's see, how do I do this? You open in browser, open a new window. Let's see what this does. Okay, if I make this bigger, and then if I say share screen and say screen 1. This is
Interesting, the message.
What's that?
I got a message on this end. It says Al Jones is sharing screen, so that's cool.
I can't see what's going on. Can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
I see. Yes, the path that I planned.
Okay, so yeah, this is your path, and I seem to recall this was before you made some corrections to it. So let me go
Yeah,
back.
that one is, that is before corrections.
So let me see, how do I get back to here? Go here and then say apply. Come down here and say,
I can see that.
well, I was going to open a new window. So there's second one if you want to make any comments between the two. I think I still got both of them up here if we need to go back to them.
Yeah, it was, I mean, obviously the goal would be to make this simple and make it quick and easy to create that path. I'm not there yet, but the sort of Python assisted manual process is the way I would describe it that I've got going on is those green lines taking the GPS coordinates based on an origin statement, use the LL to XY or the lat-lon to XY function and generate X and Y, a Cartesian plot for those. That feeds into the Bostrophodon. Nope, sorry, didn't do that. Feeds into the Shapely library inside of Python to create concentric rings, and I use a negative number, which makes the concentric rings go inside of that outer polygon. And then that's sort of one step. Then the second step is about getting that coverage map. The line segments are generated rather easily based on the inside polygon. And then it's a bit of a process to get the U-turns coordinated. There's a circle on the lower middle there that you see, and that represents an obstacle that's in the yard. And so both the concentric rings as well as the blue stripes, if you want to call them that, have to take that into consideration. So it's all very clunky and manual, but yeah, I have something that I can go test now. And
So I switched back to your first one here. So down at the bottom here, you've got the circle and you're driving right through it. So then you went to the next one where you corrected that, and now you've somehow told it to stay out of that area.
So over time, that'll get easier and faster. And I don't know, I was trying to, there's other developers on my Miro website or Miro board. And so I was actually trying to dig into AgOpenGPS to see how they're doing all of this, because I mean, they've got this all down in their world as well. So hopefully there's some borrowing of approaches that can be done.
So speaking of AgOpenGPS, did you realize there's two different websites involved, or two different YouTube channels? They got the one's called AgOpenGPS, and it's only got like 8 videos on the thing. And that's basically saying, here, go download the compiled stuff and put it on your vehicle, and shows you how to run it. And the other one's the farmer Brian T or whatever that's called. And then that's where all the videos are that says, oh, here I am driving with the GPS, here I am driving with the IMU, here's how I do Dubin's curves, here's how I do all this other stuff. So I think it's called Farmer Brian T, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at the exact website, but I was spending most time on the Farmer Brian T site. So anyway,
And I'm not sure the one that's called AgOpenGPS has a lot of stuff that you're really interested in right now. It's more like a commercialization of the thing. So at first I thought, well, what happened to all of his videos? Then finally I realized, oh, he's got two different YouTube channels. So that's why. And I guess I noticed that because I'd search for something and they would pop up, and I'd see him driving around his field and thought, but that's not on his AgOpenGPS website. And it turns out, well, it's not, because it's somewhere else. So that's another way to find it if if we didn't have that Farmer Brian T, if that's not the right thing to search for, just search for AgOpenGPS and you'll see little videos popping up, and you can get back to the channel doing it that way too. So for anybody else that's watching and wants to try to find that.
So that's creating paths, needing to test them, getting a day. Today is, the end of November, and so believe it or not, it's 50 degrees where I'm at the moment. So trying to get out and test while I have a sunny sky.
Yeah, I think I checked my temperature today. First of all, I opened the door to look out. I thought, well, it's not bitterly cold out today, and I think the forecast said it's supposed to be like 49 degrees today, and then like tomorrow it's supposed to be like 23. So if I want to go and do any digging, I better get around and do it before I get a hard freeze. So I need to look into that.
That's all I got.
Oh, another comment. Since you're sitting in your vehicle there, do you transport your lawn tractor in that vehicle, or do you have a pickup or a trailer or something to move your stuff around?
I have moved my tractor from my house to another plot of land, and we used a trailer. So it's here away from home and has been here now for a couple of months. So I'm not moving it back and forth, but I borrowed his trailer to move it the one time that we moved it.
I was just curious if it fit in a vehicle like that, because every once I think about putting it in mine, but I think I think it's too tall to fit in my vehicle. It might even be too wide if I don't have the deck on it, but if I really needed to transport it, I was thinking I might be able to do it that way. But I think right now I haven't taken the hood off, and I haven't taken the steering wheel off, or even the seat. So it could be it's too tall to fit in my vehicle. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, Matt visited me in Texas one time, and he brought it. He didn't have his cutting deck on, and he didn't have the shroud and all that stuff on, but it fit in the back of his, I don't know, Jeep Cherokee maybe. But it fit.
Yeah. And again, I keep saying that's why I built my mini tractor, which is about half the size of a lawn tractor, simply because it's easier to transport. And if I could take it in my house, you probably don't take yours in your house very often, but I could take mine in
No,
my house, and it's a pain to run it up and down the stairs, but since I just pick up the front and use it like a two-wheel cart and then bounce it up and down the steps, like I could, if I wanted my living room, I could put it in my living room. So that's, I keep telling people think about these things before you start doing something, decide how are you going to transport it, how are you going to, where are you going to store it, and things like that. So
definitely an advantage to be small when you're working out the software side of it anyway.
oh, one more thing I thought of, I was saying that I found this, I think it's called Minneapolis ArcGIS, and it just points to somebody's ArcGIS web server. And I thought, well, I wonder if anybody can do this. So I pulled up your property where you live, and it turns out it shows the streets and it shows the houses, but it doesn't show the property lines. But if I look over to the west of you, I don't know if it's a couple of blocks or half a mile or whatever, then I can see property boundaries over there. But I didn't notice any houses. I didn't zoom in on it. So anyway, the stuff I'm doing apparently is not available to you, and I don't know if that's the city that creates that or sets that up, but it could be there. If I click enough buttons, or maybe different layers or something that would say a layer that says property boundaries may have shown up, but I looked at it for a few minutes and couldn't figure it out. So it just depends on where you live, I guess. Kind of like the stuff you keep complaining about Texas. They won't give you the GPS correction stuff, and the various things like that you run into, just depending on where you live and who's in charge, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure the ArcGIS guys would sell the subscription if they wanted to pay for it, but
Yeah. Anything else?
not on my side.
Okay, I guess we're done.